In this session, let's understand how to work with promise methods. In the previous session, we saw how to create a simple promise, which is we can begin with creating a constant, say promise is equal to new promise constructor that we'll use. And for the argument of this constructor, we need to provide a callback function with two arguments. One is resolve, what we want to do after the promise is resolved, after it is successful, and what we want to do if in case promise is not successful. So that will be reject. Now let's provide some async code over here. Let's say we have a timeout. We are saying that we have a certain third-party service which is going to give us a random number, for example, but it's taking some time. It takes 3 seconds to provide the random number, so which is going to be 3000 milliseconds here, and it's going to have a number. For now, I'm simply going to use math.random to get that number. So what's going to happen here is we have math.random, which will return us a random number in between 0 and 1, which will always be 0 point something. And what we are saying is the service is going to take some time to figure out the number and return us. Roughly the time is 3 seconds. And during this time, we do not want program to just wait for that number to appear. We'll go ahead and execute rest of the program. So we'll have a quick log here which says program continues. Okay, so this is a very simple async program where it will begin the execution. It will see that certain process is taking time. It will go ahead and execute rest of the lines of program, and whenever service returns the response, we can go ahead and do whatever we want to do with the response that we received. Now let's say we receive the random number without any issue. Now in this case, our condition is if the number is greater than 0.2, the promise is successful. We always want the number to be greater than 0.2 just for creating some condition. So what we are saying is if the number is greater than 0.2, we are saying yes, that is expected response, and we want to resolve this promise. So we'll say resolve. Else, if the number is not greater than 0.2, and we can also make it equal to. So if the number is not greater than or equal to 0.2, we can reject the promise. So what we are doing here is, this is our asynchronous operation. We don't know how long it's going to take, but once the operation is successful, we have certain condition depending upon which we can figure out if the result of the operation is expected or not expected. Just for understanding purpose, what we are saying is the response that I receive from this third-party service, if it is greater than 0.2, I got what I wanted, my promise is resolved. If it is not, there is some issue and I want to reject the promise. Okay, and depending upon the promise is resolved or rejected, I have certain code that I want to execute. That we can do it by using these methods. So very first method then will always get executed if the promise is resolved. There is another method which is called as catch. This will get executed when promise is rejected. And there is finally method which gets executed in either case. Even though promise is resolved or rejected, as long as promise is finished, this method will get executed. How to write these methods? Again, it's very simple. We'll use this constant promise dot then, and over here we'll provide the function to execute after the promise is resolved. So the function that we want to execute here, I'm simply going to add it by using this callback function. So it takes the argument res, which is nothing but whatever we provide here. So we can provide any details here. Currently I'm providing the number that we return from random. So this detail will be picked up as argument here, and we can utilize it in the function that we are running after the promise is resolved. So for now, what we can say is simply console.log promises resolved, and I'm providing the result over here. Similarly, we can do promise.catch. Let's say it's not greater than 0.2 and promise gets rejected. We can catch it here. Let's call it as reject, and this is going to be our arrow function, which is going to do whatever program that we want to run or whatever function that we want to run after the promise is rejected. In this case, I'm just saying promise is rejected. And whatever we want to execute, just in case, it's not compulsory, but if there is certain code, certain function that we want to execute in both the cases, whether promise is resolved or rejected, I have certain piece of code that I want to always run, that we can put in finally. Again, it will go as an arrow function here, and we'll simply say console.log promise is complete. It might be rejected or resolved, but the execution is finished. So let's quickly take a look at this whole thing. We have certain asynchronous code. At the beginning of the execution of the program, it will see that there is a promise. So in the beginning, it will put the promise in the pending state. We saw in the previous session, it will keep the promise in the pending state, and it will wait for the state to either get fulfilled or rejected. Until that time, until the state of the promise is pending, it will go ahead and execute rest of the program. It will not execute these methods because these are dependent on the result of the promise. So it will wait as long as the state of the promise is pending. It will go ahead and execute rest of the program. As soon as the state of the promise changes from pending state to either fulfilled state or rejected state, depending upon that, it will either execute then or catch, and after that it will always execute finally if we have provided finally method. Okay, is it compulsory to provide then, catch, finally methods? No, but the sole reason we are doing promise is because we have liberty to provide the specific function to execute if the promise is fulfilled. We have a specific function to execute, or we can provide a specific function to execute if promise is not resolved, if there is any error. And at the end, finally is basically optional, but if you have anything to execute after failed or successful, we can always put that in the finally. It is somewhat similar to try and catch finally block that is generally there in a lot of programming languages. If it's easier that way, you can compare it and understand that way. So let's go ahead and run this program. So program continues when the promise is in pending state. It is going ahead and executing the rest of the lines of program. But in this case, the random number that we received is 0.09, which is not greater than 0.2. So promise is rejected. It picked up this particular method or this particular function, and it says promise is rejected. This number is this over here. So whatever we pass to this particular method, this particular value will be picked up as argument of that particular then or catch function. And that's how we got this printed here, which is nothing but this line, and promise is complete, which is this line over here. And because there was error, it's creating the error over here, which is called as unhandled promise exception. Okay, let's run it a few more times to see the other value also for resolving. So currently the number that we received is 0.4, which is greater than 0.2, and promise is resolved, promise is complete. So this is a simple example. What we wanted to say is, for an async code, if the promise gets resolved, we have promise.then method. If promise is not resolved, we have promise.catch, and we have promise.finally, which gets executed always, and the rest of the program continues until the promise is in the pending state. As simple as that. If you have any questions, let me know.